Some secrets are not whispered by men, but by the wind. And tonight, the wind remembers. There is an old saying whispered among those who walk close to the soil. The earth has never forgotten how to protect her own. When our ancestors sought safety, they did not look first to iron fences or locked doors. They turned to the wind, to the trees, to the sacred pulse of the earth beneath their feet. Spiritual protection, in its truest and oldest form, has always been natural. It is not born of fear, nor forged in fire, but grown, harvested, and blessed in rhythm with the land itself. Every element, water that purifies, salt that preserves, fire that transforms, and grain that nourishes, carries a memory older than any written charm. Those who understood this did not separate the spiritual from the natural. They knew them as twin flames in the same eternal lamp. In our modern age, we have built walls so high that we can no longer hear the whisper of the wind warning us, nor feel the hum of safety that rises from the roots of the ground. Yet, even now, the old wisdom remains alive, if we dare to remember. A bowl of salt in a corner, a burning leaf of sage, a pot of rice shared among loved ones. These are not idle gestures. They are echoes of ancient conversations between humanity and nature, reminders that what we seek protection from is not always outside us, but often within the imbalance we create when we forget our belonging to the world that birthed us. Consider for a moment the sea, endless and deep. It is both gentle and terrifying, both womb and grave. Yet no evil lingers there for long. The sea cleanses by nature. It takes what is unclean and returns it renewed. This is why salt, born from that vast and holy body, became one of the first protectors known to humankind. In ancient households across cultures, from the deserts of Arabia to the mountains of Greece, salt was sprinkled across thresholds, mixed in bath water, placed beside sleeping infants. The people believed, and rightly so, that it formed a boundary between purity and corruption. But salt does not only banish darkness, it teaches discipline. It shows us that purity requires constancy. You cannot cleanse once and forget, the same way the tide does not rise once and call its duty done. In the same way, plants have long been sentinels of the spirit. Garlic, basil, rosemary, and rue. These were not merely kitchen herbs, but soldiers of light standing at the doorways of old homes. A woman in the countryside might hang garlic by her window, not from superstition, but from understanding. She knew that the strong scent of the living plant carried a vibration, a warning to the unseen, that life dwelled here and life was sacred. The unseen world, like the seen, recognizes the signature of vitality. Where life pulses brightly, darkness cannot feed. And so the simplest acts, tending a garden, boiling herbs, sweeping with intention, were spiritual armors in disguise. When one walks barefoot on fresh earth, there is a quiet hum beneath the skin, a pulse that answers your own. That hum is not imagined. It is the grounding current of the planet, a living energy that both nourishes and shields. Many modern souls have forgotten this intimacy. We cleanse our bodies but not our spirits, nourish our minds but starve our roots. The ancients understood what we now must relearn, that the soul is not defended by isolation but by connection. Protection is not the closing of doors, it is the strengthening of the house within the storm. Imagine a woman in a quiet village long ago, lighting a small clay lamp before the setting sun. The flame trembles, but it does not die. Around her, she has placed a few simple things: a bowl of rice, a pinch of salt, a sprig of mint. These are not offerings to appease any cruel deity. They are acknowledgments of partnership, her promise to live in rhythm with creation. That small act, that moment of harmony, draws a circle of peace around her. It is not the items themselves that ward away darkness. It is the intention carried within them. Her spirit says to the unseen, I am in balance with what gives life. I do not stand alone. And perhaps this is the greatest secret of all, that spiritual protection is not a battle, but a relationship. It is the way you greet the morning sun, the way you bless your meal before you eat, the way you keep your thoughts clean when the world is dirty. Nature responds to such purity because it recognizes itself within you. The river does not protect the fish because it pities them. It protects because the fish belong to it. So too, when you live in balance with the natural world, when your words, your food, and your intentions align with the rhythm of the earth, protection becomes effortless. You no longer have to chase peace. You begin to radiate it. The world has always had its shadows, its witches and whispers, its envy and unseen harm. But the ancients did not cower from these things. They understood that darkness only seeks where light has forgotten to tend its flame. So they kept their flames fed with sacred foods, with gratitude, with living connection to the soil. And when the winds howled or the night grew heavy, they did not tremble. They simply stood in the quiet knowledge that nature herself, vast and unbroken, was standing guard beside them. In a world that often confuses strength with hardness, honey stands as a gentle contradiction, soft, slow, and golden, yet powerful enough to heal wounds that medicine cannot see. Its sweetness is not frivolous. It is ancient, deliberate, and spiritual. Honey has always been more than food. It is liquid sunlight, captured and preserved by the humble labor of bees who understand the art of transformation. They gather from wild flowers, from thorn and bloom alike, turning even bitterness into nectar. And that perhaps is the first lesson honey teaches, that healing begins not by rejecting pain, but by transmuting it. What hurts can also become holy if tended with patience and love. In the stories of old civilizations, honey was treated as divine. The Egyptians sealed their tombs with jars of it, believing its sweetness would follow the soul into eternity. In Vedic traditions, honey was poured upon sacred fires as a symbol of divine nourishment. The Greeks called it ambrosia, the food of the gods, said to grant immortality. Across the world, it was never just a flavor. It was a vibration, a frequency of life so high that decay could not touch it. Even now, thousands of years later, honey remains unspoiled. Archaeologists have found ancient jars of it, still edible, still golden, still alive. There is no better metaphor for resilience than this, a sweetness that endures time and darkness alike. In the realm of the spirit, honey speaks the language of the heart. It reminds us that gentleness is not weakness, it is wisdom wearing soft clothes. When bitterness enters the home, through conflict, jealousy, fear, or grief, it settles deep, hardening like stone in the unseen places of the spirit. Many people try to fight it with anger or force, yet the spirit cannot be cleansed by the same emotion that stains it. Honey shows another way, a spoonful of kindness, a word spoken softly when you have every right to shout, a moment of compassion towards someone who has not earned it. These are spiritual acts, the honeyed gestures that dissolve bitterness drop by drop. They are slow, yes, but so is the sunrise, and yet it never fails to bring the light. A story is told of a woman who lost everything, her home, her wealth, her joy. She lived in bitterness for years, until one morning she began keeping bees in the yard behind her broken house. At first it was just to pass the time, but as the bees moved through her garden, the flowers bloomed brighter, the air seemed lighter, and something inside her began to thaw. When the first jar of honey came, she held it up to the sun and wept, for in that sweetness she tasted her own forgotten resilience. The bees had taught her without words. Healing is slow, but it is certain. You only need to keep tending, keep gathering what good you can, and let time do the rest. Honey teaches another truth, that sweetness is not only meant for the self. Just as a hive thrives by shared labor, so too does the human spirit find its healing through generosity. When you share your sweetness, your laughter, your patience, your understanding, it multiplies. You become a balm for others, and in doing so, your own wounds close. This is why, in spiritual traditions, honey was often used in blessings and offerings. A drop placed on the tongue before prayer was thought to attract divine attention, not because the gods love sugar, but because they recognized gratitude in its purest form. Sweetness, after all, is gratitude given a taste. In many cultures, honey was used to protect newborns, a dab placed upon the lips of infants so that their first taste of the world would be gentle. Imagine what wisdom lies within that act, to begin life with sweetness rather than fear. The ancients knew that what you feed your soul first shapes what it becomes. If you feed yourself with anger, the heart grows sharp. If you feed yourself with sweetness, it learns endurance. Honey does not deny pain, it answers it with patience. That is why, even in the darkest rituals of protection, it is honey that is offered. For evil cannot thrive where sweetness lingers. The bees themselves are symbols of sacred discipline. They do not hoard. They work, they give. They live in harmony with their queen and their garden. Every drop of honey is the result of countless small journeys, each one humble, each one necessary. That is how the spirit heals, not in one grand act, but in many small choices. Choosing peace when you could choose resentment. Choosing silence when anger tempts you to speak. Choosing to forgive when every part of you wants to stay wounded. Each of those moments is a drop of honey, and though they seem small, together they create something immortal. To understand honey is to understand that healing has texture, taste, and time. You cannot rush it, just as you cannot rush the bloom of flowers or the patience of bees. The world may demand quick cures and sharp defenses, but the spirit demands sweetness. A restoration that seeps through the cracks of your being until even your scars begin to glow. Honey carries within it the power to remind us that love is stronger than bitterness, that tenderness is armor, and that the sweetest things are often born from struggle. The flower must first endure the sting of the bee before it can know the blessing of honey. Bread is one of the simplest things a human hand can make, and yet it carries within it the deepest symbol of thankfulness known to mankind. Long before coins or contracts, people shared bread to seal their trust, to express peace, and to honor life itself. Bread is not only nourishment for the body, it is a prayer made tangible, a living hymn baked from earth's generosity and human labor. When flour, water, salt, and time come together, they do more than feed. They remind us that everything good requires patience, presence, and gratitude. Bread, in every culture and every faith, is the meeting place between the divine and the daily. It is the proof that holiness can be found in ordinary hands, and that every meal is a quiet altar where gratitude can kneel. To bake bread is to engage in an act of reverence. It begins humbly, a handful of grain crushed and sifted, mixed with water drawn from the earth. The yeast rises slowly, like breath filling a soul. The dough is pressed, folded, and left to rest, as if to remind the heart that all creation, even our own, requires time to rise. When it finally meets the oven's flame, it transforms, browns, and breaks open, releasing a scent so ancient that even the angels might pause to inhale. The process mirrors life itself: pressure, patience, transformation. That is why every loaf is sacred. It holds within it the story of surrender, of what happens when you trust time and give thanks for the heat that shapes you. In ancient households, breaking bread was more than sharing food. It was an act of covenant. To eat with another was to declare safety, to promise peace. You could not share bread with someone you intended to harm. That simple act carried immense spiritual weight. In the Middle East, the phrase "to eat salt and bread together" meant to form a bond unbreakable even by distance or death. Across centuries and continents, this ritual has endured, from the Passover table to the Christian Eucharist, from the village feast to the humble family dinner. Each crumb reminds humanity of the same truth: gratitude binds more strongly than fear ever can. Bread teaches that gratitude is not merely spoken, it is shared. When you offer a piece of your loaf, you declare that what you have is enough, that you believe in abundance even when the cupboard looks bare. Gratitude is not a feeling born of wealth, but of awareness. The poor who divide their bread are often richer in spirit than the full who hoard it. In many traditions, the first loaf of a harvest is broken and distributed among neighbors or offered to the divine, not as payment, but as praise. It is an acknowledgement that no harvest grows from human effort alone. The rain, the sun, the soil, and the mystery of life itself conspire to bring forth grain. Gratitude, then, is the soul's recognition of partnership with the unseen forces that sustain it. There is an old story told among travelers. A man wandering through famine came upon a widow with only one small loaf to her name. Starving himself, he asked her for a piece, expecting to be turned away. Instead, she broke the bread in half and handed it to him, smiling faintly. He ate, and as he did, he felt warmth return to his limbs, strength to his heart. When he looked back to thank her, she was gone, and in her place sat a small bird pecking at the remaining crumbs. The man fell to his knees, realizing that he had just met gratitude made flesh. That story, whether true or not, has traveled centuries because it reveals the spiritual alchemy of giving, that what you share multiplies, that gratitude attracts grace, that even in hunger, a grateful spirit can feed another. Bread also speaks to humility, a quality inseparable from true gratitude. You cannot bake without getting your hands dirty. You must knead, sweat, and wait. There is no shortcut, no trick to cheat the yeast or the fire. Life too demands that same surrender. Gratitude is not passive. It is the daily act of working with what you are given, of trusting that your labor will be enough, even when the outcome is unseen. To live gratefully is to accept the rhythm of creation, to understand that not every day yields a feast, but every day offers ingredients for one. Even when the oven seems empty, gratitude whispers that somewhere the dough is still rising. In times of despair, bread becomes a bridge back to hope. Think of the refugee woman who bakes flatbread on a cracked stone, her children waiting silently beside her. She has lost her home, her fields, her safety, yet as she kneads that dough, she whispers thanks. Not because she denies her pain, but because she knows that the act of giving thanks protects her spirit from decay. That small loaf, fragile as it is, carries her dignity. Each tear that falls into the flour becomes part of her offering. She feeds her children not only food, but faith. Faith that as long as bread can be made, life is still possible. Gratitude, like bread, expands when shared. It fills rooms, warms hearts, softens anger, and feeds what is hungry in all of us. To make or break bread with another is to say, we are both human, we both need, we both thank. In a world that moves too fast, where meals are eaten in silence and gifts are taken for granted, the simple loaf still calls to us, a reminder that gratitude is not a grand gesture but a daily practice. It begins in the kitchen, in the humble work of hands that knead and hearts that bless, in the willingness to pause and say, "This right here is enough." Garlic is not a subtle thing. It announces itself before it arrives, sharp, bold, unapologetic. Its scent fills a room and lingers long after the flame has gone out. And perhaps that is why it has always been a symbol of courage, because it does not hide its nature. Garlic does not whisper, it declares. It has no interest in pleasing the faint-hearted. It grows low to the ground, unadorned, wrapped in plain skin, yet within that humble bulb lives a fire so fierce that darkness itself recoils from it. For centuries, people across the world have believed that garlic could drive away evil spirits, curses, and sickness. But beyond superstition, it holds a deeper truth, that protection begins not in what you carry, but in who you are willing to become. Garlic embodies courage because it teaches the soul to stand boldly in its own scent, to be unafraid of being too strong, too honest, too alive. In every culture where fear once walked, garlic followed close behind. The Romans hung it above doorways, the Slavs braided it into wreaths, the Chinese placed it in tombs to guide the dead safely home. Even in the Middle Ages, when people feared the unseen more than the sword, garlic was worn around the neck as a talisman against the invisible. But its magic was not in the bulb itself, it was in what it represented, the human defiance against decay, disease, and darkness. Garlic reminded people that courage could be cultivated, that bravery could be grown from the soil. When the world felt cursed, when sickness spread like shadow, people planted garlic, and in tending it, they tended their hope. The earth has always rewarded those who refuse to bow before fear. Courage, like garlic, has layers. It is not the absence of fear, but the persistence through it. To peel a clove is to reveal the heart beneath its layers of protection, and so it is with the soul. Every layer we shed, pride, doubt, guilt, shame, brings us closer to our raw essence, the place where true strength lives. Garlic burns the tongue if eaten raw, just as courage burns the heart when first awakened. Yet in that burning is purification. It clears, it cleanses, it strengthens. In the kitchen, garlic transforms what it touches, adding life to dullness, depth to blandness. In the spirit, courage does the same. It brings flavor to existence, vitality to the soul. Without it, everything we do tastes like fear. There is an old folk tale from Eastern Europe about a widow who lived at the edge of a forest haunted by spirits. Each night, strange sounds surrounded her house, whispering threats, stealing her peace. One winter evening, she planted a ring of garlic bulbs around her small home, whispering prayers as she pressed them into the soil. When spring came, the bulbs sprouted into tall, green shoots, and the whispering ceased. But more than the forest changed, she did. The woman who once trembled now walked with steady steps. She no longer feared the dark because she had rooted herself in courage. Whether the spirits left because of the garlic or because she herself had become strong enough to silence them, no one knows. That is the secret of courage. It transforms both the threat and the one who faces it. In the body, garlic strengthens the blood and cleanses the breath. In the soul, courage does the same. It purifies what stagnates and teaches us to exhale what no longer serves us. When you face injustice and still speak the truth, that is the scent of garlic upon your spirit. When you step forward despite trembling, that is the heat of garlic in your heart. When you refuse to let bitterness turn you cold, that is the healing fire moving through your veins. Courage is rarely graceful. It stings, it bites, it leaves traces of its presence. But those traces are signs of life. A world that smells of garlic is a world that has not yet surrendered. Garlic also reminds us that courage often grows quietly, in small, unseen places. The bulb hides beneath the soil, gathering its strength in silence. It does not boast of its coming bloom. In this way, courage too begins in the hidden parts of us, in private prayers, in quiet resilience, in moments when no one sees. A mother who rises again after loss, a worker who stands against injustice, a child who speaks truth when silence would be safer. These are the fields where courage grows. By the time it breaks through the surface, its roots are already deep, its spirit unbreakable. Garlic does not need praise to do its work, neither does the brave soul. In spiritual traditions, garlic is believed to ward off evil not because it fights, but because it vibrates life. Darkness cannot dwell where vitality is strong. Likewise, true courage does not destroy fear. It radiates light so fiercely that fear has no place to stay. When you carry courage within you, you become like garlic hanging by the window, a living declaration that your spirit cannot be poisoned. The scent of your strength alone is protection enough. There is a beauty in how garlic teaches courage to coexist with humility. It is not a grand or majestic plant. It does not seek to be noticed. Yet, in its simplicity, it saves lives, enriches meals, and strengthens bodies. True courage, too, is quiet and constant. It does not roar, it breathes. It does not dominate, it endures. It speaks truth in plain words and stands firm in plain places. A clove of garlic may seem small, but when crushed, it releases all its power, reminding us that sometimes life must press us to reveal what we truly hold inside. Courage is not the absence of pressure, it is what awakens when pressure comes. And when it does, like garlic, it fills every corner with its unmistakable fragrance, a fragrance that declares, I have lived through the dark, and I am still strong enough to flavor the light. Rice, more than any other grain, carries the heartbeat of humanity. It grows quietly, humbly, in fields that glisten beneath the sun, 1,000 tiny pearls of sustenance rising from the water, each one born of patience, care, and balance. Rice does not ask for riches, nor does it demand admiration. It simply multiplies. That is its sacred power. To plant rice is to declare faith in tomorrow. It asks the farmer to trust the rain, the soil, the timing of the seasons, and in return, it gives enough to feed families, villages, nations. In this way, rice has always been more than food. It is a prayer in edible form, a whisper from the earth that abundance does not come from excess, but from harmony. It teaches that prosperity is not the hoarding of plenty, but the assurance that everyone can eat, that everyone can live, that life continues. In nearly every corner of the world, rice holds spiritual meaning. In Asia, it is offered to ancestors, to gods, to guests, a symbol of blessing and prosperity. In Africa, it is cooked in rituals of thanksgiving and celebration. In the Americas, it mingles with spices and stories brought by generations of travelers and dreamers. To serve rice is to serve life itself. Its presence on the table is an act of faith, that no matter how hard the year, no matter how uncertain the harvest, the earth will provide again. There is an old belief that spirits are drawn to scarcity, to hunger, to desperation, but they flee from the smell of abundance. A home where rice simmers on the stove, where food is shared freely, becomes a fortress of warmth. The fullness of spirit repels what feeds on emptiness. Rice also teaches humility in abundance. Though it feeds billions, each grain is small, almost insignificant when held alone. Yet together they become a feast. This is the divine arithmetic of gratitude. The little multiplied by love becomes more than enough. The ancients understood this deeply. When they scattered rice at weddings, they were not merely wishing wealth upon the new couple. They were blessing them with the spirit of giving, of multiplication, of shared joy. Each grain that fell upon the ground was a seed of hope, a promise that as long as they shared their abundance, abundance would return to them. Prosperity that moves in circles endures. Prosperity that stands still rots. In one old village tale, there was a widow who had only a single handful of rice left in her jar. A traveler came to her door, weary and starving, asking for food. The woman hesitated, her stomach growling, but her heart answered before her fear could. She poured half her rice into a pot and fed the man. He thanked her and left. That night, when she went to bed, the jar she had emptied was full again. Some said it was a miracle. Others said it was the hand of the divine. But those who understood the laws of the Spirit knew the truth. When you give from the heart, you open the gate to endless flow. Abundance, like water, refuses to stay in one place. It moves where it is allowed to move. It blesses where it is shared. The woman learned what many forget, that the act of feeding another is a conversation with the universe, and the universe always answers. Rice grows best not in dryness, but in water, in the soft embrace of surrender. It reminds us that abundance thrives not in control, but in flow. The fields that flood do not drown. They transform into mirrors reflecting the sky. In the same way, when the spirit learns to receive and release, to give and to trust, abundance becomes a natural state. People who hoard out of fear lose the sweetness of what they keep. But those who share, even a little, find that the stream of life never runs dry. In spiritual truth, scarcity begins not in the soil, but in the heart. When gratitude dries, abundance withers. When gratitude flows, even the smallest seed can become a harvest. Rice also binds communities. In villages and cities alike, people gather around it, stirring, seasoning, sharing. It is rarely eaten alone. A pot of rice on the fire is a signal that guests are welcome, that family is near, that laughter will soon rise like steam. In this simple act of feeding one another, humanity remembers its original covenant. We survive together or not at all. To eat rice together is to participate in the ancient rhythm of unity, each grain reminding us that we are many and one at the same time. No feast, no ritual, no morning meal is complete without it. For rice embodies the sacred truth that abundance is never solitary. It exists only in relationship. There is something profoundly spiritual in the patience rice demands. It does not yield to haste. It must be planted, watered, watched. It asks for faith through months of uncertainty, faith that the rains will come, that the roots will hold, that the sun will return. And yet, when harvest time arrives, it comes not as a single fruit or flower, but as thousands of grains, countless blessings born from patience. In this, rice mirrors the soul's journey. Our small acts of kindness, our prayers whispered into silence, our quiet endurance through long nights. All of these are seeds. They seem small at the time, but when the season changes, the harvest is vast. The law of rice is the law of life. What you nurture in faith multiplies beyond measure. In its whiteness, its warmth, its quiet generosity, rice carries the vibration of peace. It does not shout its worth, yet it sustains empires. It does not demand glory, yet it fills every bowl. It teaches that true abundance is not about gathering more, but about giving more. When the spirit learns this, to live like rice, to feed others, to grow in humble water and yield in grace, fear loses its grip. For where there is rice, there is life. Where there is life, there is gratitude. And where gratitude flows, abundance forever follows. Prosperity, in its truest and oldest form, has never been about gold, nor jewels, nor the clinking weight of wealth that men can count. True prosperity has always been about continuance, the ability to give, to grow, to sustain. And few things teach this better than the humble bowl of rice. It glimmers softly, not to boast, but to remind the world that abundance is quiet, sacred, and alive. Rice does not stand as a monument to excess. It is a symbol of flow, of life feeding life, of generosity returning to its giver, of cycles unbroken. Where rice grows, civilization endures. Where rice is shared, community thrives. It is the simplest, most enduring proof that the divine law of the earth is generosity. Rice speaks in whispers rather than thunder. It grows in muddy fields where patience is the only path to harvest. The farmers who plant it know that they must surrender to the elements, the rhythm of rain, the mercy of sunlight, the grace of time. They cannot force abundance, they can only participate in it. That is the first lesson of rice. Abundance is not something to seize, but something to harmonize with. When one lives in tune with the flow of giving and receiving, life itself begins to provide. This truth echoes in every grain, that prosperity, like the water that nourishes rice fields, must move, must circulate, must touch others before it can truly belong to you. There is a story told in the mountains of Japan of an old farmer named Ito who was known for having the most fertile fields in the valley. Every year his harvest was double that of his neighbors. When asked his secret, he smiled and said only this: "I give away my first harvest to those who need it most." The villagers thought him foolish. How could giving away the first and best of his yield make him richer? Yet every season proved the same. His fields flourished while others struggled. One autumn, after a long drought, the villagers came to see what remained of his crop, expecting ruin. They found his paddies green and full, glistening like mirrors of heaven. Ito told them, "The hands that give freely never close to the rain." His secret was not magic, it was alignment. He understood the principle that rice embodies. Abundance cannot stay where fear holds it. Across countless cultures, rice has been scattered at weddings, poured into the hands of children, or placed on altars for the ancestors. These gestures are not decoration, they are declarations of faith. To offer rice is to say, "We believe there will always be enough." In many spiritual traditions, when the family pot of rice is cooking, no one is turned away hungry. For a home that feeds others is believed to draw blessings that never cease. Even science, when stripped of its calculations, echoes this truth in nature. What circulates sustains, what stagnates decays. The heart that gives keeps beating, the soil that shares keeps blooming. Abundance, like the heartbeat, exists only in motion. In the symbolic language of rice, every grain is a reminder that wholeness is built from the small and ordinary. One grain seems nothing, but 1,000 together can feed a village. Likewise, one act of kindness, one word of comfort, one gift of time may seem small, but they multiply. This is the miracle that rice teaches. It is never about the size of what you hold, but the spirit in which you offer it. The poor man who shares his bowl may be spiritually wealthier than the king who hoards his feast. In many ancient tales, gods disguised themselves as beggars, testing the hearts of those they met. The ones who shared their rice, even when it meant hunger for themselves, were the ones whose homes later overflowed. The lesson is eternal. Abundance belongs to those who trust its return. Rice also reminds humanity of continuity, of legacy that feeds beyond one lifetime. A farmer plants not only for himself, but for those who will eat after he is gone. In this way, rice carries within it the story of inheritance, of blessings that ripple through generations. When a mother teaches her child to cook rice, she is not merely feeding them, she is passing down the rhythm of care, the memory of survival. Every grain in the bowl holds a line of ancestry, the sweat of those who planted, the prayers of those who harvested, the gratitude of those who ate. It is a lineage of abundance, proving that prosperity is not an individual affair, but a shared inheritance. In the modern world, people often confuse abundance with accumulation. They chase possessions, believing that more will fill the emptiness inside. But rice teaches otherwise. It grows not in wealth, but in mud. Its abundance does not glitter, it glows. It is born from stillness, from humility, from balance. When one learns to live like rice, rooted yet flexible, quiet yet plentiful, one begins to understand the true shape of abundance. It is not a mountain to be climbed, but a river to flow with. When you hoard, you create drought. When you share, you summon rain. The abundance of rice lies not in how much you have, but in how much you are willing to give away without fear. There is an old woman in the Philippines who every evening places a single bowl of rice at her doorstep before she eats. She says it is for the unseen travelers, spirits, ancestors, or strangers who might wander hungry. She has done this every night for 50 years. Her family says she has never gone a day without enough to eat. When asked why she continues, she laughs softly and says, "Because the rice I give away always finds its way back." Her life, simple and radiant, stands as a quiet sermon. Abundance obeys the hand that trusts the cycle of return. To live in the spirit of rice is to live in gratitude that multiplies. Every grain cooked and shared becomes a prayer made visible, a declaration that life, in its endless wisdom, rewards those who honor its balance. Rice does not fear being consumed, for it knows that each meal is the beginning of another harvest. It knows that giving is the secret shape of lasting plenty, that no blessing truly belongs to one person, but to the whole circle of existence. In its white, shining simplicity lies the oldest truth the earth ever taught her children, that abundance, like rice, is meant to be shared, scattered, and sown again. So when the night feels heavy, when unseen hands brush the corners of your peace, remember, the earth has not forgotten how to protect her children. Eat with reverence, share with kindness, and keep these 5 foods not just in your kitchen, but in your spirit. For the witchcraft of evil fades before the holiness of a nourished soul, because ancient wisdom does not age. It only waits for us to listen again.